Hello and welcome to Line and Mouse Commentary. I'm Holland and this is my best friend Tori.
Hi!
If you're new to our show, we rank various forms of entertainment by different categories out of a total score of 10 with only 2 points allowed for our personal taste. Don't worry, we break down everything as we go. Feel free to agree, disagree, or just find something new to enjoy. Just be sure to tread lightly, there will be hot takes and spoilers. And cut to the intro. Alright, so today I chose a short film called...
Also, welcome back.
Yeah.
I hope your holidays were lovely.
Yes. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah,
New Year.
Happy New Year, whatever other holidays you celebrate.
Halloween and Thanksgiving
Halloween and
happened
Thanksgiving,
too.
yeah. Spooky season, fall season. Now where it's just in boring old January.
Where it's cold and sad.
Yeah, but my birthday is this month.
True.
so
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to me, and your birthday is next month.
That's right.
So, anyways, so today I chose a short film for us to review because I've seen clips of it on social media. So I was very interested in reviewing it. It is called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. It's
Very difficult for me to remember.
I know, the order of all the animals. And the boy, who is technically a mammal, but, you know, not in the same category. It is a 2022 animated short film directed by Peter Baynton? B-A-Y-N. Baynton?
Baynton, I would say,
I'm guessing. Maybe the Y is silent.
Benton.
And Charlie Mackesy, and written by John Croker and Mackesy as well. It's based on Mackesy's 2019 picture book of the same name. It features the voices of Jude Coward-Nicole, Tom Hollander, Idris Elba, and Gabriel Byrne as the 4 titular characters who form an unlikely friendship as they travel together in search of the boy's home. So, if you want, this is going to be some spoiler-free background of the film, and then we're going to kind of hit our categories. So, in early 2020, the book became a bestseller, and several producers attempted to acquire the rights to the novel for a potential screen adaptation. These rights were later acquired by Cara Speller, who collaborated with Matthew Freud in producing the film under None More Productions banner in their first production. J.J. Abrams also produced the film under Bad Robot Productions banner. The animation was done remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic with more than 120 people from over 20 countries working on the film. Since the illustrated book had a loose and unfinished quality of styling, Baynton and his animation team wanted to match this by using pencil ink for the characters, which had an intricate detailing and watercolor-inspired texture in the background. So it does kind of match the illustrations of the...
That was a note I had, which I'll talk about when we get to aesthetics, but I was trying to figure out, like, how
they did it technically.
Was,
yeah. So it was released, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse was released in the United Kingdom through BBC One and BBC iPlayer on December 24th, 2022, and in other countries on Apple TV Plus on December 25th, 2022. It was acclaimed by critics and won Best Animated Short Film at the 95th Academy Awards and Best Short Animation at the 76th British Academy Film Awards. It also won quite a few Annie Awards: Best Animated Special Production, Outstanding Achievement for Character Animation in an Animated Television Broadcast Production, Outstanding Achievement for Directing in an Animated Television Broadcast Production, and Outstanding Achievement for Editorial in Animated TV Broadcast Production. So that's some information. If you want to see it for yourself without hearing any kind of spoilers or influencing opinions, go ahead and click off now and then come back and watch the rest. So, Tori, go ahead and kick us into our first category.
Okay, so this was blind to me when I think you mentioned that when we watched this recently to prep for this. So I had no idea what to expect. And for this episode specifically, I feel a little bad that we're starting with plot and story delivery because I think it's the weakest category. So I only gave it 0.5 point out of 2 for plot and story delivery, and I'll talk about that a good bit. So first of all, the basic premise, I guess you could say, which I think even that is a little bit vague, but the story is there's the young human boy. He shows up lost in the snowy wood, and he is looking for home. Like, that's everything boils down to that. And through his journey to find home, he makes friends with 3 woodland creatures, and they do some things together, as most like journey stories happen, you know, just like things, natural occurrences happen that, you know, throw them for a loop. So like, that's basically the epitome of the story. There's not much to it outside of that, which for a picture book, okay, like that's acceptable. Like, I have a little nephew, and every night my sister bathes him, puts him in his PJs, and they read a picture book, and then he goes to sleep. And he's like not 2 yet at the time of this recording. So like, that's great. You don't need a super like complex story delivery for an audience that's not yet reading themselves. Like, it makes sense in that sort of way. However, on my next question, or I guess my first question in watching this is, so who is the audience for this?
I had that exact question too. So that's a great note to have, because I had the same one. That's why it's so great. I'm just kidding. But
well,
no, I think that's a great question to ask when you're translating children's work into a maybe more adult medium.
And I asked that question because in appearance, it looks like a children's storybook. It does, and it has come from a children's picture book. So obviously it's going to look like a children's picture book. But in every other way, I feel like every other aspect of this short film would go over the head of, or not be truly appreciated by, a young audience. An audience between the age of 1 and 8 is probably not going to grasp some of the, I guess, plot moments, which even then, it's kind of a vague term to lay it. So let me expound on that a little bit. For one thing, the dialogue is so poignant and poetic so much of the time. I feel like it could be easily lost on a younger audience. I don't think kids are dumb by any means. I'm not trying to say that like a 5-year-old can't understand or have like a poetic, poignant line stick in their mind. I'm not trying to say that like kids are dumb, so this isn't for them. But I think the nuance behind a lot of the dialogue and the context of when the dialogue is delivered is not, it's going to be more complicated for a small child to grasp this. This is dialogue written to almost touch on the nostalgia or almost like childhood longing of somebody who is past that point in their lives now. It's pretty, it's beautiful, it's poignant, but I can't figure out who this movie is for. And so I think because of that, the idea of like, what is this movie trying to do becomes very muddy, very vague. It feels like the entire movie relies on these one-liners, and while it's pretty and poetic, it does feel almost like it would be better suited for like an episodic sort of format maybe than a short film, but at the same time, there's not enough content to make it episodic. But you have these like really pretty one-liners, and they're, they've all got these morals attached. I didn't write them all on my sheet, but I wrote them in my phone. Let me read you a few. Little morals like, there's so much freedom in how we react to things. Okay. Everyone feels a bit lost sometimes. Okay. Doing nothing with friends is never really doing nothing. I am so small. Yes, but you make a huge difference. Being honest is always interesting. And asking for help is not giving up. It's refusing to give up. Those are beautiful lines. They're wonderful lines. And a lot of them did touch my heart as a viewer. But I think they would touch an adult much more than they would touch a child. And so where's the middle point? Like, who is it for? And if the answer is that this is simply for adults and it just looks pretty for children to watch with their parents, then okay, but it's not made clear that that's who this is for.
Well, and I think you have an interesting point, because it's almost as if the film itself, which also I think I forgot to mention this in the intro, but the film is 32 minutes long.
Yeah,
that's the
very
runtime.
short.
It's very short. There is such little context in delivering those kinds of quotes. There's not a lot of substance surrounding the delivery of that quote. So as an adult, it does feel very moving and impactful, because as adults, we have a frame of reference in our life that we connect that to. And a child doesn't. They need a story to connect that moral to.
Exactly. And so because there's so many of these one-liners and they're thrown out in, again, very beautiful, poignant, pretty, poetic way, but there's not enough of like an action or build-up or situational lead in to a lot of these one-liners. It's simply like they're just walking through the snow and somebody just says something off the cuff. Like, for instance, the whole being honest is always interesting line. The context behind that line is they've been walking for a while and somebody, I don't remember who it is, says, the fox doesn't say much, does he?
It was the boy.
The boy says, yeah, the fox doesn't say much, does he? And so they kind of stop and they look back at the fox and he says, well, that's because I don't feel like I have anything interesting to say. And so I think the horse says, being honest is always interesting. And as an adult, you're like, dang, I have felt like that so many times. I've been in like a group of people that I don't know very well, or I don't feel like I can be myself around, and I feel like I don't have anything interesting to say, and I'm surrounded by people who are so interesting and cool and funny, and I'm just nothing. Like we if you have lived probably 15 years or more, you have had a situation like that. But when you're 3, you may not, when you're 3, most 3-year-olds, I'm not going to generalize all of them, most 3-year-olds say whatever is on their mind at any given moment. Doesn't matter who they're talking to or if it's appropriate for the situation. That's a lesson and a moral that sticks more when the older you become.
Well, and it's almost like that kind of lack of restraint wouldn't translate well to children either, because you don't want to tell a kid you should be honest all the time, and now you have like
because now it's like, where's the balance between honesty and tact, and a 4-year-old isn't going to have a full grasp
honest
of that
all the time,
right?
Like you said.
So it's hard, because I wanted to give it higher points because I do think so much of the dialogue is beautiful, but I tried to look at it in the context of what it is and where it came from, and I just don't think it translates as a children's short film because of that. I think if they had made it more clear that this is for your parents or your grandparents, or, this is a sad, moving, melancholic, touch on, things that as adults we try to suppress or move on from or put aside, then I think I would have accepted it more. It's hard for me to like see it in this packaging and think that it is a good children's short film in that way. Hopefully I'm making sense, but I'm trying to be very concise with like why I gave it a low score. Now I think that like there's like the classic journey group thing, and we've seen that, you see this in media all the time, where it's like a band of unlikely friends comes together and they, help somebody, either the main person find their goal, or they all have a similar goal, or they hope to all accomplish their goals along the way. Like whatever it is, it's like you have 4 people who don't know each other at all at the beginning, and by the end they're like inseparable, and it's heartwarming, and you like that sort of, it is the perfect setup for what I would call the found family trope, which is a trope I like. I don't want to like make it sound like that's a negative, but the found family trope is a trope, and we talk about tropes in this podcast. And this short film is that like exacerbated to its fullest, because at the end they make it to the town, the closest town, which I'll talk about this a little bit in characters, but like how the whole movie even starts is very confusing. But now we're at the end, okay? So let me just talk about the end. I'll talk about the beginning more in characters because I'm going to devote it to talking about the boy. But at the end, they find the town that they've been looking for. The whole purpose that they're here is because the boy needs to find a home. And oh wow, homes look warm and look at all the lights and stuff. And then he turns to leave and he doesn't want to leave his friends. And there's like the heart touching, like warm moment, and the emotions are roiling. And I shed a tear. I'm not gonna lie, I was crying. And he was like, oh, but I already found home, you know, with his friends. And like, it's so sweet. But then my adult brain went, but it's snowing outside. And this boy still needs a house.
And
like,
has he eaten anything
this
whole trip?
And he's only wearing like a pair of jeans and like a lightweight long sleeve shirt in the snow for
like
however long.
Sweater.
Whatever it is. It's still not enough to be out in the snow for as long as he was.
Right.
He hasn't eaten at all that we've seen. And he is a human boy. He still needs shelter. 4 walls and indoor plumbing would do a lot for this kid. Like, he can't go live in the woods with the horse, the fox, and the mole. Like, he just can't. That is not the long-term thing here.
Just because they're talking animals don't mean they can adequately care for this child.
And it's not like we've seen evidence that any of these animals have like appropriate.
It's not like the beavers in Narnia.
Right.
They can just
where like the
cook up some
Pevensies
food
could live in their house if they needed to. Like, it's a home with like furnishings. Like, there's no indication that any of the animals in the short film have that. So I'm like, at the end of it, I'm like, but I still don't feel like we're resolved, because maybe he found his emotional home, but he still needs to find a physical home.
Yeah.
That is a basic need. And so again, maybe this is adult versus children brain, because in my head, I'm thinking he still needs a physical home. Like, physical needs must be met for emotional like needs to thrive, you know, otherwise then all sorts of terrible things can happen. Yeah. So, but you know, a 5-year-old's not going to watch that and be like, but he still need a house. You know, he's going to be like, oh wow, he loves his friends. I want friends like that. You know, that's what the 5-year-old's thinking. Right. And it's not wrong that the 5-year-old's thinking that way, but it leaves so many questions about the story. And I just think the vignettes and the one-liners, they're just so sparsely connected to the core of what the plot is, which the plot is so vague. It's like you can hang basically anything off of this plot, but that doesn't mean it necessarily makes the plot better, richer, or more like understandable or graspable. So I just think that like, while all of the little pieces are lovely, they just don't really work together for like one cohesive story. So 0.5 point out of 2 for me.
All right. I also gave plot and story delivery 0.5 point out of 2. I agree with a lot of the points you made. I thought kind of the general setup of the plot was really good. It's like this boy being lost, which I feel like is very, it's a very compelling, like, jumping off point, because most, you know, people seeing a lost child, we are compelled to instantly have buy-in that we want this kid to find a safe place to be or find his home. And it sounds like a great jumping off point. But like you said, we don't ever get that at the end. And I don't think we get it in a satisfying way. So I definitely had notes about that as well. Like, that home is not a place, home is the people you're with. But we didn't really develop that plot along the way, that this is the overall theme of this boy trying to find home. We've started with that, and we sort of ended with it, but nothing in the middle had anything to do with it. Except that these animals gave these really compelling one-liner quotes that to this boy didn't really mean anything, because they didn't give him any context around it to really drive those morals home, those lessons home. So that's kind of my overall reason why I didn't give it full points. I thought that the like, if we're defining home, if that's like the theme that we're trying to define, what is a home for an individual, it's the people you're with that makes it a home.
But you still need a house.
No, but even then, it's like, if that was just the message, is like, I'm trying to find home and like meaning a place of belonging.
Yeah.
If that's like the metaphor that we have, and this is all symbolic and he's not actually looking for a physical home, then don't give us a town at the end.
Right.
And give us some bonding between these characters along the way. We never have any moments where these characters bond with one another. They're just giving existential dialogue back and forth to the boy. And sometimes the boy gives a little bit of existential thoughts as well. But it's like, that doesn't create a bond or friendship, even when they encounter conflict, like with the storm or when the boy falls off the horse's back. Like, one, I think it's extremely melodramatic when he fell off, like the boy like lets go of the horse and he falls. It's like this huge catastrophe, which I'm like, okay, we're pressed for time, so yeah, it's a, you know, we have seconds to like make this a big deal. But it's so melodramatic that I'm like, okay, is this going to be like a theme of like not letting go of the people that are trying to protect you and help you? And then no, because when they're flying, he just like lets go of the horse's mane and there's no consequences there. Like, so you can't even like pin like metaphor or symbolism in this plot along the way. It's just very loose overall. Even some things I felt like, okay, with the boy and the mole's a prey animal, and then they meet this fox, and the fox is a predator, and so then we have a little bit of this, like, this was not a pun intended, but we have like a lion and a mouse from Aesop's fable moment where the mole bites the snare that the fox is caught in, and then the fox just kind of follows at a distance. It's not like we're welcoming you into the fold because, you know, just because you're a predator doesn't mean you have to be an adversary. So like there was a theme moment we could have had that was, again, never really touched on again. So I felt like we had all these vignettes of a scene, of little snippets, and there wasn't enough development around them, but then there's also not enough substance in them to stretch it out longer than a 32-minute short. I thought, like, especially when I think the boy says to one of the animals that, you know all about me, and like, that's why you're my home. But it's like, but you don't know anything about this boy.
Yeah.
We didn't learn anything about him, who he is, where he came from, like nothing. And all these like philosophical concepts of like kindness, like being fearful of, you know, the wilderness, looking after beauty, like the mole gives that concept, like there's all this beauty we have to look off of, the boy when he falls off the horse, like all of this are like little nuggets of like philosophical truth, and yet there's no surrounding context that told us why this lesson matters. And so, like you said, I feel like who is this audience? Like, who's the audience here? Because if it's written for children, we should have some kind of scenario,
right,
to give us an understanding of applying these concepts to our life, instead of just telling a child, being honest is always interesting. Look, the world is so beautiful. Isn't it so wonderful that we have something to look after? Okay, that sounds really nice in black and white words on a page, but you have to have a frame of reference of application, or it's just words.
Right.
Like, so overall, and then I felt like I was just very puzzled as to what the point of this film is. Even the moments where it seemed like the culmination of this was that they said to the boy that he's loved, that he's enough, that, you know, I'm glad we're all here is another way to say I love you. Like, I'm glad we're all together. This like togetherness and belonging. But like, is that the theme? But again, we don't have a very, like, we didn't witness any bonding or like coming together of this group of people, or any kind of friendship between them that would give us that's like the payoff. And it's like watching this film, they just gave us payoff. And I almost feel like they just tried to give us like a dopamine hit with every like impactful quote. And then when you stop back and look at it, which we do in this film, like, it looks really pretty. It's like, I felt like we kind of just got to watch a beautiful visual adaptation of like one of those like daily motivational tear-off calendars. Yeah. Like, where it's a really nice quote, and it is maybe
like
really...
it's framed on the wall at your dentist's office.
Yeah, or like it's the motivational poster, like the cheesy ones that like now have become a meme itself, like freedom, and it's like an eagle flying over a mountain, and it's
how
like,
you react to things.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, so overall, I'm like, what is the point of this? There's nothing in this. I watched this very much so with like my critical glasses on, and like, I'm watching this and I'm like, I don't feel any compulsion to care about the plot of this movie, because even like you said, from the premise, like, if the boy is trying to find home and like home is the people you were with, the home is the people you like connected with in the journey along the way, or like some, you know, something like, you know, really overplayed message that could come from any Hallmark movie. Like, we saw him in the wilderness in the snow all by himself, and he seemed to be doing okay. He didn't even have a conflict to like come from.
Yeah.
And like, we didn't see any moment where he needed these animals, where these animals needed him, where they, you know, endured or overcame a conflict together. Like, nothing. And I was thinking, are people gonna, am I supposed to just give it a pass because it's a short film and it's only 32 minutes? I'm sorry, but we get better depth of plot and character and story delivery in a 22-minute Avatar: The Last Airbender episode, the short film Paperman done by Disney that won an Oscar. It had really depth of a plot that was engaging. It brought you into it.
And I don't think there's any dialogue in that either.
There's none. Mm-hmm. There's none. It's completely like silent with, you know, instrumental. And so it's just like, I felt like this was just a vignette or a pretty avenue to just give us these inspirational quotes. And without that, if you don't have a frame of reference to pull from, they're really meaningless because the film itself didn't give us any plot at all to drive any of these home. So I hate to say this because I do think it's very beautiful, and I think it has it's clearly beloved and critically acclaimed, but there's just no substance to this plot. And so that's why I gave it half a point. I felt like the setup and it had a lot of like semblances of themes and nuggets that we could have just focused on one of those. Like, take one of those inspirational quotes that, you know, means the most to you as an author or a filmmaker, and just make the entire 30 minutes about that. Yeah. And then that's the punchline at the end, the part that drives home and hits your heart.
I think that's kind of what I like was trying to say. You just did it better when I was saying that, like,
oh, I wouldn't say that, but
that like it almost feels like these one-liners would lend itself better to like episodics.
Right.
Because then you could take 30 minutes to expound on each of these, and then you would have all of this, you know, maybe it takes you 10 episodes to get to the town, but at least we've now got these like morals that are taught and like shown and applied through each 30-minute episode or whatever, you know?
Yeah. So, half a point out of 2 for me.
Okay. So the next category is characters, and out of 3 points, I gave this 1.5 points. I am just really split. There are some things that I really, really like about the characters, and there are some things that I think are just not great. I'm going to probably start with the negatives. So the negatives boil down to, for me, is that each character, while distinct, I think the only one that really grows in any capacity is the fox. And his growth is simply going from like aloof, distant, and like, I guess, like hesitant to like affectionate and warm toward the end. And I don't know if that's enough growth to really like give it all these great points for. It's the only one really worth noting. But the boy, the mole, and the horse are the exact same as they are from the beginning to the end. And some might argue with me and be like, but at the end they all realized that they found home in each other. I think finding home in people that you enjoy being around does not necessarily mean that you yourself have grown as a person.
That's very true. That's so true. And I think that that's something that generally in like American culture is something that people think. Like, if you find your friends, it means that you
found your friends.
You have nowhere else to go as a person.
Right, but that's not true. And the truth of the matter is that if you find friends that are truly loving toward you and want what's best for you and you for them, then through time, which I get that this only a 30-minute film, I'm not trying to say that like this needed to happen in the film, but you know, you push your friends to be better versions of themselves, or at least inspire your friends to be better versions of themselves. And so, you know, there's a level of like accountability and things like that, you know, in any friendship that's deeper than surface level, these are present things. And I hope that everybody out there watching has at least one person in their life that they feel like they can be this deep with. So I'm happy that all 4 of them are now chummy friends, and I'm happy that the fox will hug the little boy now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have learned and grown and they are now, more confident or stronger people now. That's not the case. They just physically moved from one place to another and became affectionate toward each other. And I don't think that growing affection is growing character. I'm sorry, but I just don't think that it is. I don't think that growing affection is bad. I'm not trying to say that it's bad or a negative. I think it's good to grow affection for people that you spend time with. Like, I would be concerned if you were spending time with people and not growing any affection for them. But that doesn't mean that your character has grown because you have grown affection for them.
Right. It just means that you like each other better.
Right.
Which could just happen with, you and the clerk at the gas station that you see every day.
Yeah. It's not growth though. And that's why I wanted to state that I think the only growth that's really notable is the fox's, because his character does change a bit, but it's not even significant enough to like really have any big change in the dynamic of the friend group in general.
Yeah.
I think that the friendship bond that they share, it is very precious and it is very sweet, but it is unrealistic, and not because they're talking animals and this is a boy.
Right.
I think it's kind of like what you were stating earlier, is that it's like, you have all of these lovely like expositional dialogue back and forth, but like which character is really benefiting from this? Because if it's just the wise old owl that sits in the tree that tells the naive little boy who doesn't know anything, nuggets of wisdom, then okay, like if that's just what it is, then that's just what it is. But does that really develop a friendship as dear as it's depicted in this short film? Not necessarily. I think like delivering wisdom or delivering knowledge is best received, and this does go along with what we were saying in plot, if there's a situational reason for these things to be said. So those are kind of like the negatives. Now, also here, okay, last negative. Who is this boy and where did he come from? Because maybe this could have been a plot note, but I put it in characters because he is so confusing, and maybe it's not important that we know who he is and where he came from, but it sure would help me, like, have a little bit more, chips in the ring if I understood why is this. I mean, it's obvious the boy is fed. He's not starving. He's clothed. So he at least had somebody recently give him clothes. But why is he showing up like he's got amnesia in the middle of a snowy field and we don't know who he is, where he came from? Why can't he go back to where he came from? Does he have a family? Is he an orphan? Is he like, I don't understand why you're here. And if I think if I understood, and it's like, well, he's lost and that's all you need to know. But like, if I knew more, that could potentially benefit my care for your character, because I agree with what you said with like, innately in us as humans, we look at a lost child and we want to see them safe. Like, I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing, but I could have even more investment if I understood, like, I no longer have my family, or right. Something like that. Just even a simple line like that.
Well, and that would give us even more compulsion to want him to find a new family.
Right.
Because he doesn't have one anymore.
Yeah. Or it's like, did you grow up in an outhouse somewhere? Like, yeah. There's just so many questions about him. And I have less questions about the animals, because at least the where did you come from question animal is answered very easily. They're living in the woods.
Yeah.
These are all animals that live in the woods.
Except a horse doesn't really live in the woods.
No, he doesn't. But it's more likely that a horse would be wandering around than a person.
And the horse is a Pegasus. So is
right.
he
So there's already a little bit of there's a little
he...
suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
But like walking through the wood and finding a horse is way more likely than walking through the wood and finding a little boy who won't tell you where he came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I accept the animals just appearing way easier because they're animals and that's what they do. Mm-hmm. But like a human little boy must have some sort of background. You were birthed. Do we have to go back that far? Because there had to be something along the way. Well, like, why are you here?
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's my last negative note. So I'll go ahead and do the positives though. Voice acting was absolutely lovely. I do want to give credit to that. These are all established actors for the animals, at least. It seems like the voice of the little boy was a child, so obviously not as established. But the mole, the fox, and the horse are all established actors, who have careers, and I think they did a wonderful job. I think each voice matched the design and almost personality traits of that said animal. And I also think it's nice that each animal and the boy, they're all fairly distinct personalities. I wish we had more chance to see how distinct, but I think that it's pretty obvious right from the get-go that like the boy is kind of this soft, naive boy, and he's got a big heart and he, has a lot of compassion. And so that's pretty evident. And then you have the mole who's like a little more hesitant, but still willing to like go along. And, he's a little bit more peppy. He's a little more welcoming. And then you have the fox who's more aloof and, distant and hesitant, a little colder of a personality. And then you have the horse who is kind of like, in my opinion, the horse is kind of like the grandpa character. Like he's, the quiet, steady, not really ruffled kind of character. And I think that those are all distinct enough that it gives enough of a variety of like personalities on the screen. And I think it makes some of the dialogue back and forth, fairly interesting. Aside from everything else we've already said. And I think the design of each character is lovely. This kind of dips into aesthetics a little bit, but like whoever thought to put a cute little sweater on this mole, that was cute, okay? And like he's where'd he get that? Maybe he does have a house that the little boy could live in where he's making sweaters. I don't know. But
his mom made it.
Yeah, his mom made it for him. But it's like, I think the character design is really cute. I think all the characters are very likable. And I think that the personalities are distinct enough that they don't feel completely flat, but they definitely don't feel fleshed out either. I think it's kind of in the middle. And I think if there was more of a realism in sort of like their bonding, that it would have helped this a little bit more. But it really does feel like three animals that are just kind of like talking at a little boy for 30 minutes instead of talking with or learning from him as well. So because aside from the fact that like they're following the boy, which is why they all come together, so maybe you could argue that the common bond is their care for the little boy. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a strong enough thread to follow through. So 1.5 points out of 3 for me.
All right. I actually gave this 0.5 point out of 3. I do agree. I think the casting is exceptional. The voice acting is great. The design is excellent. The acting, just the delivery of the voice actors, especially the ones that play the three animals, they deliver. Even the fox, who's a little antagonistic at the beginning, they deliver their lines with such a gentleness.
Yes.
And I feel like that can be very difficult to convey, especially because they're all male characters. It can be difficult to convey this like quiet gentleness without it either sounding dull and dry or bored or like almost like a syrupy sweetness to it. And so I like that it's just this very firm gentleness that comes through in their voice acting. I thought that was all done very well. So that's why I gave half a point. I really do have a problem with these characters because, like the plot, I have no idea what's going on with these characters here. I tried to figure it out. I was like, is this some like metaphor, symbolism? Like, are these characters supposed to be self-inserts? Like we find the character, it's like a personality quiz, the character that we relate to the most, and we insert ourselves into that as the viewer. And we find one to identify with, and then, you know, maybe they come from different frames of life, and so we can relate to them on an individual level. No, that's not really rounded out enough for that. Or do they each represent like an outlook on life? Because the mole, to start at the beginning, very optimistic, very positive look on life. Like the world is a little sunny. Maybe the fox is a little more like moody and like, you know, has the perspective. I thought, you know, maybe where they were going with the fox is like it's a kill or be killed, like dog eat dog kind of. No, they didn't really dig into that. You know, do they come from different places of difficulty and they're overcoming these? Like the horse was saying that he could fly, but then he put that aside because of peer pressure and he still wanted to be like everybody else. But no, they didn't really do that. That was only like a one beat moment. So I was like, who are these people? Are they different pieces of home for the boy? Like the boy's trying to find home, and what are kind of maybe 3 essential things you need in looking for a home? Like, I don't know. I'm just making this up off the cuff right now. Like maybe you need like a nurturing figure, like a protector, and like, I don't know, like somebody to kind of give you hope at the end, you know, like, but no, they don't represent anything for the boy to like encircle him and like provide this wholeness to his life. Like, who are these characters? And at the end of the day, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know who these people are. I don't know their relationship with each other. They don't really interact with each other at all. They just feel very like, we picked 3, and I was even puzzled at like, why were these 3 animals chosen as like our woodland creature, like helpers to our main character as the boy? Like, who are these 3? Like, why were these 3 animals chosen? Like, I would expect for a story this short and simple that you would pick characters that maybe like already had a personality that you would attach to that animal specifically. Like maybe a mole is like small and vulnerable and he doesn't think he can make his mark in the world because he's so tiny and he lives underground. But no, they didn't go that route. So I don't even understand why these 3 animals were specifically chosen, other than the fact that maybe they were just ones that the author liked drawing, and so he just picked them because he thought they were pretty. Like,
when he was a kid, he had a pet mole, a pet fox, and a pet horse.
Yeah, I mean, I like the animals as choices, but I'm never even given a reason as to why these animals. And so there's all of the why behind is the biggest reason that I didn't give these characters a lot of credit. In general, like my overarching question was like, who are these people? How do they grow or change or impact each other? And at the end of the story, I can't give you an answer. And I feel like that's a problem. I don't even have an answer for how did they change each other? Maybe they didn't grow as a person, but how did they change the boy and like his perspective on life? And they didn't, except from giving some philosophical quotes here and there. But even then, we don't see the boy struggle with trying to understand these. He's just like, yeah, good talk. Mm-hmm. Like, we didn't even watch him like learn from them. He's just like,
yeah, good words,
good talk.
Yeah,
here's some philosophical words from me now. Like, it's just an exchange of dialogue. I had some specific notes. The boy, I thought that like my biggest problem with the boy is he doesn't really feel like a boy. Like, he doesn't feel like a little boy. What little boy of like, I don't know how old he is in this. Maybe
my
like
assumption
8.
is 5 or 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe like 7, 8.
Maybe.
Tops. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be kind. What child would say that? None. This is not a real child. As soon as he said that, I was like, okay, he's not a real boy.
I want to be the first person on Pluto.
Right.
Like, that's what a kid is really
yeah. Like, I want to be kind. Okay. No boy would say that. So, okay, we've got to be having some kind of allegorical moment here. But no, we don't even have that. And I think that, what does he dream about? He dreams about finding home. Like, again, so we've taken this boy that has this old soul that he wants to be kind when he grows up, but then he's searching for a home, which don't get me wrong. Like, every adult is even searching for that, that purpose and meaning in life. But we didn't even dig in deep enough for that. I think it would be more impactful. This whole film could just have so much more impact if we change the boy to a teenager or a man. Because then we would know, okay, I don't know who this person is or why he's in the woods or where he came from. That would answer that question.
Yeah.
But then all of the lessons told to him, we would understand that that's impacting this young man because of some difficulty in his past that we don't need to know about.
Right.
And so the same way that it impacts us because we have a past and difficulty in our lives that other people don't need to know about to know that something can have meaning to us. I think that just changing the boy to either an older like teenager or a young man would have more of an impact, because that's sometimes when you need that simplicity in your life to kind of like break things down to these, philosophical quotes. And then a statement like, being honest is always interesting. We would see that have impact on him without even knowing like what hardship he has overcome, that would then have meaning to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like for him to be this really naive, young, innocent little boy who has this weird old soul, but then he still needs to learn from these animals. But does he really? Like, and then he says things that are very like philosophically deep and quotable too. It's like, does he even need these animals? Because it seems like he doesn't. Like, he seems to not have really learned anything from them along the way. Whereas somebody that's older, they've had more things happen to them just because of the passage of time. And so they need somebody to come alongside them and remind them of maybe simple truths that they've forgotten. So I think that is kind of a problem I had with the boy as kind of our main character. And that was another reason I couldn't figure out, like, are we supposed to self-insert? Like, are we supposed to see ourselves as this boy trying to find our home in life? But no, because he's just as, not knowledgeable, but like he's just as aware of this deepness of life as these animals that are supposed to be helping him.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really seem like he needs a whole lot of help at this point.
Yeah.
The mole I liked as a character. I feel like they were going a good direction with him as this kind of setup as this really brave mole that when he like approaches the fox to like cut the snare, he shows this kindness, this generosity of spirit, this optimism. I feel like overall he's the most rounded because he feels like more of a complete character. But then he doesn't really do much. I almost feel like the whole movie could have just been the boy and the mole.
Yeah.
And we could have just had the two of them, and maybe the boy could be more melancholy and have a negative outlook on life, and this, mole comes along and shows him the beauty in life. And we would have seen that nice contrast in perspective. And, but then when we add these other characters like the fox and the horse, the fox I felt like was a little confusing because here he is, like, we introduce him as this enemy to the mole because he's a predator, but like, is he an enemy just because he's a predator? I mean, he's got to eat something. Yeah. Like, he's a fox. Like, I felt like, where are we going with this? Like, he's automatically the bad guy because he's the predator animal going after the mole. Like, maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Like, could we have had a little more, like, interesting difference in, that trope? It's like, he becomes the outsider, but then he doesn't really overcome any adversity from having to, like, overcome this perspective of him, like, you're bad because you're a predator and you tried to attack the mole. And, like, no, he really is, like, willing to be kind and good on the... We didn't even go that direction. So he just, like, stays kind of an outsider until then he just decides, I'll give the boy a hug. But like, why? We don't see any growth or depth to cause that change in this fox, other than he like felt bad because the mole helped him. Like, did he though? Like, we don't need, I don't know. It was just so puzzling. And then the horse, I couldn't figure out what this horse was for a long time. He doesn't really have a huge personality because he's just their transportation. Like, they just hop on his back and they're like, all right, well, we'll ride you out of the woods now. And then it's like, oh, you can fly. Great. Now I have an airplane to ride to the village. Like, I was like, and I even thought like, okay, maybe for a little minute, like, he's like the protector, like he's falling into that kind of archetype, because like when there's a storm, they kind of circle all around him. But then no, not really. He doesn't really take on this like protector role or anything, because then he becomes, you know, they didn't give us any reason to think that like he wasn't brave and then he became brave, or he just was naturally protective and then he had to then continue to fulfill that role, because now he's gonna sprout his wings and then fly them to the village, and then, you know, it looks really pretty, but then, you know, nothing really came of that either. So I feel like we had all these moments where these characters are pretty like blank slates, but it's not a blank of enough canvas for us to kind of like insert yourself into the main character like a video game character. It's not a blank of enough canvas to find like which one of these characters is supposed to represent the audience, but then there's not any depth to them. There's too many of them for us to figure out which one are we supposed to relate to, and then there's no depth to any of them to give us any reason to be attached to any one of them. So I almost feel like there's just like shallow levels across the board, and we don't really learn anything about them. We can't figure out like what's their deal, like what's their objective, because clearly they came from somewhere and now all of a sudden they're just perfectly content to just abandon everything and just follow this boy. But like, we don't get any reason or rationale. And again, I think it goes back to kind of what we talked about in the last category. Like, who is the intended audience here? Because for this amount of like deep quotes and these characters, like, there's not you would expect, I was looking for like literary themes in watching this, because I thought, oh, surely this is like allegorical or metaphorical, or there's symbolism in here, and like it's a narrative about life and how you move across life or overcome adversity. But there wasn't any theme. So if it's for kids, are they just trying to here look at the pretty animals? Like, so I was just left very unsatisfied with these characters overall. But I just couldn't, other than the fact that they look beautiful and the casting and voice acting is done really, really well, I couldn't really see any merit in these characters. And again, we can have, and not to tie it back again, but like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you can have 4 characters introduced in one 22-minute episode, and we already know so much more about these people and where they come from and like what they're about and what their goal is in life and their outlook on life in a 22-minute episode. And this is a 32-minute short film, and we just didn't get any of that. So that's why I gave it half a point out of 3.
Okay. So the third category that we talk about is aesthetics. And out of 2 points, I gave this full points. I think this is where the movie shines.
Yeah.
So one thing that we don't talk about this a lot in aesthetics, but I kind of wanted to talk about it because I think it is the like hanger that most of everything else hangs off of, and that's the mood. And I was thinking, and I was like, what are like a couple words that I could use to encapsulate how I feel the mood of this film is? And those 2 words that I landed on were the mood of longing and melancholy. And I know that sounds like 2 kind of negative words, but I don't think they're necessarily negative. I think like with the word of longing, there is a hope that comes with longing. And I think with melancholy, that's kind of tied into like reminiscence and nostalgia and like other words that I think have a little bit more of a positive connotation. But I do think that a majority of this film feels melancholic, even in happy moments. Now, I think that melancholic / longing mood does fit very well with all of the bits and pieces that make up the aesthetic. So I think the whole thing taking place in the snow fits. That fits. You know, a wintry vibe. You know, even during the day in the winter, you know, things are a little bit more blustery, a little bit more gray than they are on a summer day. Things are, you know, dampened, like the sound is dampened by snow, and that was evident in the film. The music and the score, it all fits that sort of longing, melancholic vibe, even during happy moments. And I think that one thing the score did that was so good, excuse me, one thing the score did that I think was so good was it was very flowy in like sort of moment to moment, kind of matching both the momentum of action and momentum of dialogue. And I think that really lent itself to sort of heighten a lot of the emotional beats that happen throughout the film. What you said earlier about a lot of the animation being done with pencil and then the backdrop being modeled to look like watercolor. That was really interesting because a question that I had written to myself was, this seems like watercolor or chalk perhaps. Because I don't know if you've ever seen like people do like chalk art where like, and they can sometimes even take like sidewalk chalk and they make something, but then they add a little bit of water, and then the way it like fills out and then dries, it has a tendency, in my opinion, to look a kind of akin to watercolor, but there is a little bit of a difference. But chalk artists are really cool to watch, and a lot of that felt like it was one of the two. So I think, number one, I'm happy for myself to kind of sort of guess what medium was being used, because that's not my wheelhouse by any means. Is like physical art is not something that I am good at, so I don't dabble or have a lot of knowledge in. So I was happy that I seemed to at least be on the right track with that question. The animation is just so smooth. It's just so fluid. Particularly, I want to talk about the scene where the horse goes through all 4 gates of a horse. And the animation and the transitions in the movement of the horse's body during those gate changes was perfect, from the walk to the trot to the canter to the gallop. And it just, everything in that moment, I was like, wow, like the animators must have done their research or already knew a ton about horses, because and you can like see the way that the muscles change, and you know the like counts of the hoof beats and stuff changing all in like the most natural way. Is very, very good. I really, really liked that. There's lots of really pretty effects with like lighting and color, particularly toward the end when you have like the town and it's dark, but there's enough light from the houses themselves and the street lights and the stars that you can kind of make out everything, but it doesn't look like somebody shining a flashlight or spotlight on the town. And then there's a scene where it's kind of looking up like at the characters, and you can see the sky behind them, and I think the snow falling and then the stars, it's all really, really pretty. So like that sort of use of like not being afraid of using darkness as like part of the landscape, I think is really nice. And I think it's very soft in an emotional sense. It kind of ties along with what you were saying about how like all of the dialogue is delivered in sort of like a gentle manner. And I think that gentle feeling is present everywhere in the short from start to finish. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it does feel like a children's novel in that way. Where a children's picture book typically is kind of soft emotionally. And, I think it's very easy to kind of they slow down some of those emotional beats, and I think it does lend itself to like that little bit more of like that punch emotionally to the viewer. I think it's very easy to get choked up. I did a few times. Not because I think it's fantastic storytelling, but because it's like in that moment, it's pretty, it's beautiful, and it touches something within you, and it makes you think back to something, and either a sad moment or a happy moment or something. Like it does a very good job at emotionally sort of like making you feel that reminiscence that is present in that sort of melancholic feel. And all of that combined, so the animation, the score, just the colors, all of that I think together just makes a really, really beautiful package. And aesthetically, I really couldn't find any big faults. And I think that even things like where they change sort of this frames per second sort of feel, all of that is done really, really well, very smoothly. I think the editing is done really well. Nothing ever felt too rushed or like it was slowed down to the point of awkwardness. And I think that was really nice as well. So while, it's hanging on kind of a loose or vague story, I think the aesthetics shown in such a way that you could almost have that movie on like a projector in like a Christmas store somewhere without the sound going, and it would just look so lovely, and it would set such a mood. So I think that, if you can watch something and just be enraptured by the visual itself, I think that deserves its own merit, even if everything that it's delivering is just a little lacking. So full points for me for aesthetics.
All right. I also gave this full points for aesthetic. I agree with everything you said. The animation and just the visuals in this film are really where I think it shines. And I think that's why, even though the characters in the plot may not have a whole lot of substance, they're not super deep or super well-rounded, there's not a lot of explanation given to us, the fact that I think the dialogue and like these quotes and like these nuggets of kind of truth woven through them, this like philosophical beats that are in this film, the reason that they're so compelling and people find such resonance with them is because they're delivered with such a beautiful medium. Mm-hmm. If these were, I think that the visual delivery of this as a film makes it even more emotionally compelling than I have not read the picture book, but I feel like it gives you even more emotional compulsion to buy into the kind of these one-liners, because you also have just the movement, the score, that mood that it's delivered to you, and like you touched on, it just gives you, it touches you and you find resonance in it, even though you're like, I don't know who these people are or where they're coming from or like whatever, who is this boy and this, like these animals, like I don't know, but what he said impacted me. And I think that's a huge testament to the visuals. Like,
it's kind of like how, like, have you ever just seen like, it's like a picture or maybe like a short video, and it's just like a cozy living room with like a Christmas tree in the corner, and there's food on the table and Christmas cookies and a candle, and there's like some soft piano music playing, and it evokes a specific kind of feeling, mm-hmm. even if there is no story to be had. Right. You're just looking at it. And I think this short film does something very similar the whole way through.
Yeah, and I think that's a positive. I think the fact that this won an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film, I think that's a testament to just how visually beautiful and emotionally it pulls you in because of those visuals. Some specific things I had, that I think, like setting it in the snow, it's a surprisingly dynamic visual for it white being your canvas. Like snow, I feel like is so difficult to use without it all looking like washed out or bland. The different, shadowing and shading and, the contrast of the trees, and then the sun still, even the sun, sunrise and sunset, and, the different visuals we see of the lighting, it all looks the way it would look in a cold environment. The tint or hue of the sun that we're looking at when the horse is running or flying, like that sun in the background, it feels like a winter sun. It's not just this bright orange or bright red, or, you know, that yellow even gives us this feeling of coldness. And it's just such a very dynamic environment. The sound design of the snow, like when their footsteps in the snow, the different sounds, like when the mole and the boy are like sitting in the tree early on, like you hear other birds singing, bird song. It sounds like you're in the woods. The way I feel like there were moments where it kind of blended like a 2D feel and a 3D feel. Specifically, one moment I noted was with the fox's point of view. It's kind of this movement through the snow of the fox, and you're like looking through his eyes. It transitions into kind of this, at least my perspective, it looked like that was more of like a 3D rendered tracking shot, and it still blended seamlessly with the rest of the film. It didn't feel like we were kind of jarred out of watching this 2D, you know, what
suddenly we're in Call of Duty.
Right. Yeah. Or like that we you know, we were watching 2D traditional cell animation, and now we're watching like a 3D like roller coaster ride, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was done really well. The horse galloping, like you mentioned, but then also the stop motion kind of feel of when the boy falls off the horse, that kind of dynamic, just that change in rhythm of what we're watching just was very visually appealing. It gave us this kind of, I mean, I mentioned in plot, I felt like it was a little melodramatic, but it gave us that emotional tone to have concern for what was happening on screen. And so I thought that aspect of the storytelling was really good. The score I really liked. It feels very timeless. It doesn't feel like it belongs to any one era. It feels like it belongs. I don't know if this would make sense to anybody, but it feels. I remember as a child watching you know, maybe it was like on Reading Rainbow or something. You know, Reading Rainbow, they would like tell the story of the book, and you would watch the images of the book, and the illustrations would animate on screen. Yeah. It was like that, but it was the Beatrix Potter, like Peter Rabbit story. Okay, yeah. The score for this film feels like it could fit in that era. And so it gives that very timeless, classic literary feel. Yeah. And I like that. I like that it doesn't feel like I'm listening to 80s synth music or, you know,
90s grunge or something
or even like, you know, classical, like your royalty-free classical music from, you know, Beethoven. It just feels like it's a very timeless classic work of literature being told on screen. I also, another kind of 3D and 2D perspective, the horse, the moment visually where the horse lets his wings grow and it's against that reflection of the water, just beautiful. I mean, so many moments are just so visually just gorgeous to watch. And it makes this film like worth hanging in for the 32-minute runtime, because you're like, this is just beautiful. Like everything I'm watching, it's just like it's like eating a really good meal, and like every bite you're just getting more and more just immersed in this world that these animators have created. And I think it's a huge testament to the team of animators that produced it, and the vision of the, you know, the director and how this story would be told. And you know, the fact that it was made by 120 people across a whole bunch of different countries. I can't remember what I said at the beginning of the episode, but it was very, very good. The only moment I noticed where there was kind of a visual moment or a sound moment in the storm, where the horse is talking to the boy and the animals that are kind of like up against his side. And there's a little bit of mixing issue with like the sound effects of the storm and the horse's dialogue. I felt like it got a little muddy there, but genuinely, I couldn't find anything negative visually in this film. It was just a beautiful, beautiful film. And I think that alone is worth kind of the Oscar win that it obtained, because it just was done so, so well. So I really don't have anything negative to say. So I give it 2 full points for aesthetics.
Okay. So for the next category, it's personal taste and preference. So out of 2 allotted points. I gave this 1.5 because I know that sounds really high, especially after all of the like I talked about it. But I have melancholic tendencies, so that vibe does resonate with me. And sometimes that's embarrassing for me, but I don't want to be embarrassed by it. So it did touch my heart, and I cried. And, you know, like I said, logistically, logically, a lot of this doesn't make any sense, but I cried anyway. So I liked that. I don't think it's a bad thing to have a good cry with media every once in a while. I think it can be cathartic and therapeutic. I know rationally this is a bit messy, but I really enjoyed every emotional beat, and I would watch it again. I'm not going to tell people this is the best film of all time, because I don't think that. But for the fact that I'm only having to invest half an hour of my life into this, I think it's a fine investment. And it's not the greatest payoff of all time, but for the time that I have to invest and to what I receive back, I think it matches. And so I'm satisfied enough with the fact, like, if I had to sit here for an hour and a half and only get this much payoff, I don't think I would feel the same way. But knowing that I only have to invest a little bit of time to get back kind of these nice emotional beats, to me, that was perfectly fine. It was an okay trade-off. I didn't mind it at all. So I don't really have much more to say outside of that. So just 1.5 points out of 2 for me.
Yeah. And that's the point of like our scoring system. It's like we have to be as objective as possible for those other categories. That doesn't mean you can't like it,
right?
You know, so
we could someday do like the worst thing ever. Oh wait, we already did the Twilight series. But you know, it's okay for us to be like, I acknowledge that this is bad, but I still love it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You know, or the other way around. It could be like, I acknowledge that this is a work of art, but I still don't care for it.
Right.
So you know, it works both ways.
Yeah. So out of total possible score of 2 for personal taste and preference, I gave this 0.5 point. So this was very visually appealing to watch, and I personally have a lot of respect to the animators who made this happen, but I feel like there wasn't much of a story or point other than being a beautiful delivery of some motivational quotes. So I did enjoy it. I mean, it was, like you said, I'm very glad it was only 32 minutes, but I think that it's very visually beautiful and appealing, and I think that, you know, it's a nice watch. I feel like I would enjoy watching it if I were like, you know, a little under the weather and like laying on the couch, or maybe it was like a rainy day outside and I didn't want to go out, or maybe it doesn't snow down here, but if we're snowed in, just like curl up on the couch with a blanket.
If you were like taking like a weekend vacation to like go ski somewhere in the mountains, and it's like you've skied all day, you're kind of tired, you like lay on the couch, you got like a cup of hot cocoa and you watch this, like that would be the vibes, you know?
It's a total vibe.
Yeah.
Like, and so I did enjoy it. It's absolutely not gonna like make my top 10 list of favorite films of all time, but I do think that it was enjoyable, so I give it 0.5 point. You know, I really didn't dislike it per se. I think like we said, like objectively, I think it has quite a few flaws from an objective storytelling standpoint, but it's beautiful and it's cozy and it's a mood. So 0.5 point.
It is a mood. All right, so the last category that we talk about is creativity. So out of 1 point, I gave this 0.5 point. And I think the two things that I wanted to really talk about with the creativity is they did win an Oscar, which makes it, in my opinion, a milestone or an icon of sorts. And there are lots of Academy Award winners that I have know nothing about. So I'm not trying to say that getting an award automatically makes you iconic, but I do want to acknowledge that like the pros in the industry obviously thought it had some merit to it. So I think if I was a filmmaker working on this project, that would be a milestone for me. So I want to acknowledge that as a milestone for the creators. And I really think that I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about short films in general, which is not something that I watch a lot. But in my experience, an animated short film, most of the time, is going to be something comedic or silly. And I think about how Disney and DreamWorks do this a lot, where they have like an established IP and then they do like a short film that's like a goofy spin-off of like whatever that established IP is. And I think that the animated short film market is unfortunately saturated with all of that. So while I don't consider myself an expert on short films by any means, and I think that I have to acknowledge things like Pixar, like you mentioned earlier. So like Disney and Pixar does do standalone, well thought out short films. I'm not saying they're not out there. But I think that overall, I found that a lot of short films tend to be on the silly or comedic side. And so this is a very different vibe for an animated short film, at least in my experience. And I think in and of itself, that's a little creative. But I really like the fact that they used 120 animators from 20 different countries, collaborated on this. That's a lot of different styles and opinions that they somehow seamlessly were able to make mesh and blend into one thing. And that in itself seems like a creative feat that deserves acknowledgement. So for those reasons, I wanted to give it the half point.
I think that's completely valid. I actually give it 0 out of 1 for creativity, but I don't disagree with your rationale. My rationale was just a little different. I think the visuals are very beautiful, but personally, is this film really anything that new or innovative? I think it is a nice callback to classic works of children's literature, but the fact that it's like this traditional animation, watercolor-esque style, while I think is kind of the highlight of the film, I do think that Paperman, which came out several years prior, kind of gave us that throwback to the traditional like hand sketch kind of, and even went even a little further into the black and white with the highlighted, red color. And so I feel like that sketchbook throwback already existed. I would argue that Paperman did it better. The substance of the film as the whole doesn't really warrant enough credit for me. And I also think that this film kind of tried to redo what A.A. Milne did with Winnie the Pooh.
Oh.
And I felt like Winnie the Pooh did it so much better because it gave that contextual reason behind these very impactful, like simple quotes. And so I feel like if Winnie the Pooh hadn't become so over, like, produced and commercialized, if you took the traditional animation style of the classic Winnie the Pooh books and you took that and made it into a short film, it would essentially be this film just with more substance.
Yeah.
So, which, I mean, I guess you could say, don't come after me. I guess you could say, well, nobody has. So, but yeah, because Winnie the Pooh's owned by Disney now, and they're going to make these CGI-filled movies about piglet hunting heffalumps instead of like the really heart and soul of why,
like the original like storybooks,
which is what Winnie the Pooh, why it stood the test of time. Like those works of literature essentially are like what this book is trying to be. Like Christopher Robin's The Boy, the Pig, the Bear, and the Rabbit. I mean, so I didn't think it merited a lot of creativity. I'm not in any way taking credit away from the merits that I do think it deserves. Just creatively, I feel like Winnie the Pooh already hit it, and Paperman already hit it in the short film, and this didn't really do anything super new or innovative. I think what it has done is great. I think it's nice and refreshing to see, but that doesn't, in my perspective, really make it creative. So I didn't give it any credit, but that is, again, I'm not trying to discredit the merits that I do think it deserves. So,
okay.
What was your final score?
So my final score came to 6 out of 10.
My final score was actually 3.5 out of 10, which is a little sad, but, you boosted your score so much with your personal taste and your creativity. So, alrighty. Any final thoughts before we move on to our lightning round questions?
No, but I think that this film does fit the vibes of January.
Yeah,
so
definitely. So we should have worn cozy sweaters for our filming.
Except in real life, it's very warm where we are.
It is. It's very warm outside. Welcome to Charleston.
Yeah, we're literally both in shorts and t-shirts right now.
It's very hot. Okay. Just I don't have a ton of lightning round questions,
Okay.
but do you have a favorite character? You only have 4 to pick from.
Yeah,
so.
I would say probably the mole.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's cute in his little sweater.
Yeah. I think that I would also say the mole just because he's very well rounded, but I am a fan of foxes. So
Yeah.
I've liked foxes since I was like
I also like the horse.
6 years old. So
I was a horse girl too, so I do have a little bit of an affinity for the horse.
true. He's a Pegasus too. He can fly.
Even better.
Even better. Do you have a favorite visual moment?
This is gonna sound weird, but it's kind of toward the beginning when the boy and the mole are walking down the snowy hill,
mm-hmm.
and you can see how nicely animated the snow is like moving, especially with the mole because he's got a round bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you can see as they walk through like the snow like carve out,
mm-hmm.
and like I just think it's really nicely done, and it looks really realistic.
Yeah.
So
I think mine that I can recall, because I wrote it in my notes, was with the horse and the reflection of him in the water when he lifted his wings out. I mean, I just thought it was done really well. And I like the way that they animated his feathers. They didn't like draw each individual feather on his wing. It was just like the concept of it. It fit very well stylistically.
Yeah,
and yet
it feels
it's
very storybook.
Yeah. So I liked that. Do you have a favorite?
Honorable mention. I do like the scene where the fox is saving the mole from the creek or whatever, and the camera dips.
Good.
The camera kind of dips with him over and under the water, and I think that looked really nice. So.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah,
that was really good. Do you have a favorite quote?
I think I really like the one where it said, I don't remember what character said it, but it was like, doing nothing with friends is not really doing nothing, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a cute one. Because I think sometimes it's better to just like be with people, even if you're not doing anything significant,
mm-hmm.
because it just feels less lonely, I guess, than just doing nothing by yourself.
Yeah. But I don't know if this was necessarily my favorite quote, but I really liked when the mole said, basically another way to say I love you is saying I'm glad we're all here.
Mm-hmm.
And because I just like, even with people that you're not necessarily like, maybe they're just like coworkers or they're, maybe close acquaintances, but like, the fact that you're glad that you're all together and that kind of like warm feeling you feel inside, like that really is a form of love.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not necessarily a deep love or certainly not a romantic love necessarily. It's just maybe a platonic love. But like the fact that feeling of like, I'm glad we're all here together. Like I like you and I value you. And like that really is in a way saying that you love the people that you're with. And so it's just like such a simple like concept, but I thought that was really, really nice.
Yeah.
So
I liked it too.
Do you have a least favorite moment?
I think it's the boy not actually going into the town at the end. I was like, we came all this dang way, and you're not even gonna walk in. You can still be friends with your animal friends and live in a house, and that whole ending kind of made me frustrated.
Well, and I feel like that was also an opportunity, again, if you just took a little more like time to like dig in deep on like commit to just one theme of the story, like just one point of the story. Like you could have, the point at the end could have been like, yes, we meet people in life and they impact us for the better, but then at some point you have to say goodbye, but it doesn't mean you don't love each other and you can't like,
keep in touch.
Yeah. It's just like, but you need a house. And some food. You haven't eaten since this whole journey started.
I don't know how many days it's been, at least 2.
Right. I think my least favorite moment was when the boy at the end said to his like animal friends, but you've known me. What did he say? He said, you've like something like you've known me all along, or like you know me.
No, we didn't.
No, we knew nothing about you. And like I felt like that part I was like, no, you didn't.
And it's like if they're gonna imply that maybe like there's like periods of their journey that we don't see as an audience, where they just like bare their souls to one another and like give their history, but then give us a beginning of a scene where it kind of feels like they're ending that, so that we get this inclination,
or starting it and then it like fades, the dialogue audio fades.
Give us an inclination that these animals know anything about you.
Yeah, but they don't,
because I don't have that inclination.
And I had that note in characters and I forgot to mention it because I felt like I was getting too long-winded, but it's like the fact that this is a young boy and we've chosen a young boy as a character because of that innocence and vulnerability, we've lost any depth of like, what is there to know about you? Yeah. Like, you're a blank slate. You're like a young, fresh flower. Like, there's nothing that we need to know about you because you're like the like symbolic of innocence and like vulnerability.
You're at the start of your life or whatever.
Whereas if we were, again, I think that it would be better if it was a man instead of a boy. Like, there would be something to know. You know, you've known me all along. Like, usually that implies you've known the good and the bad. Yeah. But like, we know nothing about this boy by the end of the film. Last lightning round question. Is there a story, maybe a story, a fable, a folktale, or other children's media you would like to see reimagined in this style?
I think, like, it would be cool to see, like, in this visual style, some of the, like, old, like, Hans Christian Andersen, like, stories or fairy tales or whatever. I think those could lend themselves to look really nice in this kind of style. Especially if, like, they got a score to match, like, the vibe of each of them, you know? I think that could be really nice. Maybe specifically, like, is Thumbelina a Hans Christian Andersen?
I think so. Maybe?
Yes. Hans Christian Andersen. So, like, something like Thumbelina, I think, would look really cute in a style like that. Because I think there's like a little bit of like a magic to the, like, you could add like the element of magic to something like this, and I guess there is an element of magic to the fact that the horse is a Pegasus in this film. So like the fact that it feels very natural to that world already kind of exists in like that style. So I think it could be an easy translation.
Yeah, it could be good. I was thinking maybe, I was trying to think of like going into, I don't know, maybe like mythology, like the story of like Hercules or like the Odyssey or something like that, where you would have this style, but instead of it being like very slow and like slow paced, trying to like use this style to do maybe more like action-esque sequences could be really interesting. Like the way that the boy fell off the horse and like that kind of stop motion. They're very dynamic like aspects of visuals, but I was thinking maybe something like that. Or like, what if you like retold some of like the Wizard of Oz stories that were like, maybe not necessarily like the original Wizard of Oz, but also, well, we have to start there, but like also the sequels to the Oz stories, like Return to Oz, and you know.
I just had an idea too.
Okay.
This style, I know that this book has been adapted, so whatever, but imagine this sort of animation style for a story like The Giver.
That would be good. Yeah.
Because I feel like The Giver already has this kind of mood to it. This sort of like melancholic, reminiscent.
Yeah.
There's higher stakes, I think, in The Giver. And obviously, I think it's a much longer story, but I think it could do well. If they were to ever to animate it, I think it would look nice.
Or like if we're like going in the route of like, this is for adults, like this is an adult story, what if you did Animal Farm?
Oh, yeah, that would
Something
work.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work.
Those are good ideas.
Okay.
Alrighty, any final thoughts?
Nope.
Alrighty, well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you had a good time, because we did. If you have an idea of what we should review next, you can leave us a comment or use our suggestion box on our website, lionandmousepodcast.com. There you can also find links to our show notes, Patreon, socials. If you could, please review this episode wherever you listen to your podcasts, or give us a thumbs up. If you're watching on YouTube, do the whole, thumbs up, subscribe, all those fun YouTube things. It really helps our channel. It helps us reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate all of the support. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.